Have you ever made a wrong turn that completely changed your life? Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible true story of Elena Rodriguez, a young architect who was running late for the most important business dinner of her career. In her rush to escape a sudden downpour, she ducked into what she thought was the right restaurant. It wasn't. Instead, she found herself face to face with Vittorio Castellano, one of the most feared Mafia bosses in the city, who looked up from his solitary meal and said 4 words that would change everything. "Sit with me, Bella." What happened next involves danger, passion, life or death decisions, and a love story that proves sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most extraordinary destinies. So buckle up, because this story will leave you questioning whether fate is real and whether love can truly conquer all. Elena Rodriguez clutched her portfolio tighter as she ran through the pouring rain, her heels clicking frantically against the wet pavement. She was already 20 minutes late for dinner with Harrison and Associates, the prestigious architecture firm that could make or break her career. The GPS on her phone had died somewhere between the subway station and here, and now she was hopelessly lost in an upscale neighborhood she barely knew. Through the rain-blurred windows of the expensive cars lining the street, Elena could see warm golden light spilling from restaurant windows. She needed to find Rossetti's, the elegant Italian place where her potential employers were waiting, probably wondering if she was the kind of person who couldn't even show up on time. At 26, Elena had worked tirelessly to establish herself in the male-dominated world of commercial architecture. She'd graduated top of her class, worked unpaid internships at prestigious firms, and spent countless nights perfecting designs that others got credit for. This dinner was her chance to finally break through, to land a position with a firm that would let her create the soaring, beautiful buildings she dreamed about. She spotted an elegant restaurant with warm lighting and an Italian name on the sign. Through the rain, she could barely make out the letters, but it looked like Rossetti's. Close enough. Elena pushed through the heavy wooden door, shaking raindrops from her dark hair and trying to salvage her professional appearance. The first thing she noticed was how quiet it was. Instead of the bustling atmosphere she expected from a popular restaurant, the dining room was nearly empty. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, and candles flickered on tables draped in pristine white linens. The second thing she noticed was the man. He sat alone at a corner table in the back, and even from across the room, Elena could tell he was someone important. He was probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair styled impeccably, and olive skin that suggested Italian heritage. His suit was clearly expensive, the kind of tailored perfection that cost more than Elena made in a month. But it wasn't his appearance that made her pause. It was the way he commanded the space around him, the way the few staff members moved with careful deference, the way his green eyes seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. When those eyes met hers across the restaurant, Elena felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "Excuse me," Elena said to the maître d', a thin man with nervous eyes who had appeared beside her. "I'm looking for the Harrison party? I'm running late for a business dinner." The maître d' looked confused. "I'm sorry, signorina, but we have no reservation under that name tonight." Elena's heart sank. "Are you sure? This is Rossetti's, right?" "No, signorina. This is Villa Castellano." Elena felt her face flush with embarrassment. Wrong restaurant. She was already late, soaking wet, and now she'd have to venture back into the storm to find the right place. Her career opportunity was slipping away by the minute. "I'm so sorry," Elena said, turning toward the door. "I made a mistake." "Wait." The voice was deep, accented, and unmistakably commanding. Elena turned to see the handsome stranger rising from his table, his movements fluid and controlled. He was even more striking up close. Tall, probably 6'1", with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see everything. "You are soaked, Bella," he said, his Italian accent making the words sound like music. "The storm is getting worse. Perhaps you should wait a few minutes before going back out there." Elena glanced toward the windows, where rain was indeed lashing against the glass with increasing intensity. I really need to go. I'm already late for an important meeting. The man smiled, and Elena felt her knees go slightly weak. A few minutes will not make much difference now, no? And you will only arrive wherever you are going wet and miserable. He gestured toward his table. Sit with me, Bella. Have something warm to drink while the worst of the storm passes. Every instinct told Elena to politely decline and leave. She didn't know this man, and there was something about the way the restaurant staff watched him that suggested he was more than just another wealthy customer. But the rain was getting worse. She was already disastrously late, and there was something in his voice, not quite a request, not quite a command, that made saying no seem impossible. I don't want to intrude, Elena said. You are not intruding. I am Vittorio, and I was dining alone. Company would be welcome. Elena found herself walking toward his table, her wet heels clicking on the marble floor. Vittorio moved to pull out her chair, a gesture so naturally gallant that it seemed unconscious, and Elena caught a whiff of his cologne. It was subtle, but expensive, something woody and masculine that made her head spin slightly. Thank you, Elena said, settling into the plush chair. I'm Elena Rodriguez, and I'm sorry for barging in like this. I was looking for another restaurant and got confused in the rain. Elena, Vittorio repeated, making her name sound exotic and beautiful. A lovely name for a lovely woman. And there is no need to apologize. Sometimes fate brings us exactly where we need to be, even when we think we are lost. A waiter appeared almost instantly with a towel and a menu, his movements quick and deferential. Elena noticed he didn't speak to Vittorio directly, instead waiting for subtle nods and gestures. It was the kind of treatment reserved for someone very important, or very dangerous. What were you drinking? Elena asked, nodding toward Vittorio's glass, which contained what looked like expensive whiskey. Macallan 25, Vittorio replied. But for you, perhaps something to warm you up? Hot chocolate, coffee, or maybe a glass of wine? Wine sounds nice, Elena said, though she rarely drank alcohol during business situations. But this wasn't exactly a business situation, and she needed something to calm her nerves. Vittorio made a subtle gesture, and within moments, the waiter returned with a glass of red wine that looked like it cost more than Elena's monthly grocery budget. So, Vittorio said, leaning back slightly in his chair, what kind of important meeting brings you out in weather like this? A business dinner. I'm an architect, and I was supposed to meet with a firm about a potential position. Elena took a sip of the wine and nearly gasped at how good it was, though I'm probably too late now to make any kind of good impression. Architecture, Vittorio said, genuine interest lighting up his eyes. You design buildings? That's the dream. Right now I mostly work on small residential projects, but I want to create something bigger, something that will last, that will be beautiful and meaningful. Elena realized she was talking more freely than she usually did with strangers, but there was something about Vittorio that invited confidence. And what kind of buildings do you dream of creating? Elena felt herself warming to the subject. Mixed-use developments that bring communities together, buildings that are both functional and inspiring. I want to design spaces where people feel alive, you know? Where they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. Vittorio nodded thoughtfully. You speak with passion. That is rare. What about you? Elena asked. What do you do? There was the briefest pause. So brief, Elena almost missed it. I'm in business. Family business, you could say. We own several enterprises in the city. The vague answer reminded Elena that she was talking to a complete stranger in an empty restaurant. What kind of enterprises? Various things. Real estate, restaurants, construction. We have been in this city for many generations. Elena noticed that Vittorio spoke in the plural. We, us. As if he was part of something larger than just one person's business ventures. Combined with the deference of the staff and the expensive suit, it painted a picture of someone with significant power and influence. "Are you from Italy originally?" Elena asked. "My family is from Sicily. I was born here, but we maintain strong ties to the old country." Vittorio's expression grew slightly distant. "Family traditions are very important to us." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of food Elena hadn't ordered, a selection of antipasti that looked like art on the plate, alongside bread that smelled incredible. "I didn't," Elena began. "The chef insists," Vittorio said with a smile. "When he heard I had a beautiful guest, he wanted to ensure you were properly taken care of." Elena looked around the restaurant again, noting details she had missed in her initial rush. The artwork on the walls was museum quality. The fixtures were crystal and gold, and everything spoke of wealth and taste. This wasn't just an expensive restaurant. It was the kind of place where very important people came to conduct very important business. "This is your restaurant, isn't it?" Elena said suddenly. Vittorio's smile widened. "What makes you think that?" "The way the staff treats you. The fact that the chef is cooking for your unexpected guest. The way you knew exactly what wine to order without looking at a menu." Elena felt a flush of embarrassment. "I'm sitting in your restaurant, eating your food, drinking your wine, and I just barged in here like I owned the place." "You are sitting with me because I invited you to," Vittorio said simply. "And yes, my family owns this establishment, among others. But that doesn't change the fact that I am enjoying our conversation more than I have enjoyed an evening in months." Elena took another sip of wine, trying to process this information. She was having dinner with someone who owned multiple restaurants in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. Someone who wore suits that cost more than her rent, and spoke with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to having his wishes become reality. "I should probably go," Elena said, though she made no move to leave. "I've already missed my dinner, and I'm sure you have more important things to do than entertain lost strangers." "Do you have somewhere else to be, Elena?" The question caught her off guard. "Well, no, I suppose not. The dinner was the only thing on my schedule for tonight." "Then why leave? The storm is still raging. You are warm and dry here, and I am finding your company far more interesting than anything else I had planned for this evening." As if summoned by his words, lightning flashed outside the windows, followed by a crack of thunder that made Elena jump slightly. Vittorio was right. It would be foolish to venture back out into weather like that. "Tell me about your family," Vittorio said, cutting a piece of the prosciutto and offering it to her. "Do they live in the city?" "My parents live in Queens. My father works construction, and my mother is a nurse. They immigrated from Mexico before I was born, worked incredibly hard to give me opportunities they never had." Elena felt the familiar mix of pride and pressure that came with being the first in her family to pursue a professional career. "They must be very proud of you." "I hope so. Sometimes I think they don't fully understand what I do. Architecture seems very abstract compared to building actual walls or caring for actual patients. But they've always supported my dreams." "And what do they think of your social life?" Vittorio asked with a slight smile. Elena laughed. "They think I work too much and don't date enough. My mother is constantly trying to set me up with the sons of her friends, convinced that I'm going to end up alone with my blueprints." "And are you going to end up alone with your blueprints?" The question was more personal than Elena had expected, and she found herself looking directly into Vittorio's green eyes. "I don't know. I've been so focused on building my career that I haven't had much time for relationships. Most men seem to find ambition in women either threatening or boring." "Then you have been meeting the wrong men," Vittorio said simply. The way he said it, matter of fact, without the exaggerated charm she was used to from men trying to impress her, made Elena's heart skip a beat. There was something refreshing about his directness, his confidence, his apparent genuine interest in her thoughts and dreams. "What about you?" Elena asked. "Family? Relationships?" Vittorio's expression grew more guarded. My family is complicated, large, traditional, with many expectations and responsibilities. As for relationships," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "My lifestyle makes it difficult to form connections with people who don't understand my world." "What kind of world is that?" Before Vittorio could answer, Elena became aware of a change in the restaurant's atmosphere. The few remaining staff members were moving with increased urgency, and she noticed that 2 men had entered through the back entrance. They were both large, wearing dark suits, and they moved with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested trouble. Vittorio noticed them at the same time, and his entire demeanor changed in an instant. The relaxed, charming dinner companion disappeared, replaced by someone harder, more alert, radiating a quiet menace that made Elena's blood run cold. "Elena," he said, his voice low and calm, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. In a moment, I am going to ask you to go to the ladies' room, and I want you to stay there until someone comes to get you." "What's happening?" Elena whispered, her heart starting to race. "Business," Vittorio said simply. "Business that you should not be exposed to." The 2 men approached their table, and Elena could see they were both armed, subtle bulges beneath their expensive suits that her father's construction background had taught her to recognize. The older one, with graying hair and cold eyes, spoke in rapid Italian to Vittorio. Vittorio responded in the same language, his voice carrying an authority that made both men step back slightly. Elena didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. This was not a negotiation. "Elena," Vittorio said without taking his eyes off the men, "the ladies' room is behind you and to the left. Go there now, and wait." Elena's first instinct was to run for the front door, but something in Vittorio's voice convinced her that would be more dangerous than following his instructions. She stood carefully, her legs shaking slightly, and walked toward the back of the restaurant. As she reached the hallway that led to the restrooms, she heard voices rising in anger behind her. In the ladies' room, Elena locked the door and tried to process what was happening. The expensive suits, the deference of the staff, the armed men, the rapid Italian discussion. It all pointed to something her rational mind had been trying to avoid acknowledging. Vittorio wasn't just a successful businessman from a traditional Italian family. She pulled out her phone, thinking about calling 911, but realized she had no idea what she would report. She was in a private restaurant, having dinner with the owner, when some business associates arrived. Nothing technically illegal about that, even if it felt dangerous. The voices outside had grown louder, and Elena could hear what sounded like furniture moving. Her heart pounded as she realized that whatever was happening out there, it was escalating. Suddenly, there was a loud crash, followed by shouting in multiple languages. Elena pressed herself against the far wall of the bathroom, wishing she had never left her apartment that evening. Her important business dinner seemed laughably trivial compared to whatever drama she had stumbled into. The sounds of conflict continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, abruptly, everything went quiet. Elena waited, barely breathing, until she heard a soft knock on the bathroom door. "Elena?" It was Vittorio's voice, calm and controlled. "You can come out now." Elena unlocked the door with trembling hands and stepped into the hallway. Vittorio stood there, looking perfectly composed, except for a small cut on his cheek and slightly rumpled clothing. Behind him, the restaurant looked like a tornado had passed through. Overturned chairs, broken glass, a table that had been flipped completely over. "Are you okay?" Elena whispered. "I am fine. Are you hurt? Frightened?" "Terrified," Elena admitted. "What just happened?" Vittorio studied her face for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "A business disagreement. It has been resolved." "Where are those men?" "They left. They will not be returning." Elena looked past him at the destroyed dining room. "It looks like a war zone." Sometimes business negotiations become heated. I am sorry you had to witness this. Elena stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who had been so charming and attentive during dinner with someone who had just been involved in what was obviously a violent confrontation. "Vittorio," she said slowly. "Who are you? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes searching her face. "I am someone who operates in a world that most people pretend doesn't exist. Someone who makes difficult decisions that allow other people to sleep peacefully at night. Someone who takes responsibility for things that others are too weak or too moral to handle. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now." Elena felt tears starting to form. "I should go." "Yes," Vittorio said simply. "You should. This is not a world you should be part of." But as Elena turned toward the front door, Vittorio caught her arm gently. "Elena, what happened here tonight? What you saw? What you experienced? It cannot be discussed with anyone. Do you understand? For your safety and mine." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. She understood perfectly. She had stumbled into something dangerous, something that could hurt her if she wasn't careful. "I'll have one of my men drive you home," Vittorio said. "The storm has passed, but it's late. And after tonight, I can take a taxi." "No." The word was said with quiet finality. "You cannot. Please allow me to ensure you get home safely." A black sedan was waiting outside the restaurant, driven by a man who looked like he could handle any kind of trouble. Elena slid into the back seat, her mind reeling from everything that had happened. As the car pulled away from Villa Castellano, she turned to look back through the rear window. Vittorio stood in the doorway watching her leave, his figure backlit by the warm light spilling from the restaurant. Even from a distance, there was something solitary about the way he stood, something that spoke of isolation and burden. During the 20-minute drive to her apartment, Elena tried to make sense of the evening. She had walked into the wrong restaurant and found herself having dinner with a man who was clearly involved in something illegal and dangerous. The rational part of her mind knew she should be grateful to escape unharmed and never think about Vittorio Castellano again. But another part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her during dinner. The genuine interest in his eyes when she talked about her dreams. The way he had protected her during the confrontation, ensuring her safety even while dealing with what was obviously a serious threat to himself. As the car pulled up outside her building, Elena realized she didn't even have Vittorio's phone number. Not that she would call him, of course. Tonight had been a mistake, an accident, a brief intersection of two completely incompatible lives. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to the rain that had finally gentled to a whisper, Elena couldn't stop thinking about green eyes and an Italian accent that made her name sound like poetry. The next few days passed in a blur of normal life. Work at her small architecture firm, coffee with friends, phone calls with her parents. Elena threw herself into her projects with renewed intensity, trying to forget about her encounter with Vittorio Castellano. She told herself it had been nothing more than an interesting story to remember years from now. A strange night that proved how unpredictable life could be. But Vittorio had left his mark on her thoughts more deeply than she wanted to admit. She found herself thinking about their conversation, about the passion in his voice when he talked about family traditions, about the way he had listened so intently when she described her architectural dreams. Most disturbing was the way she kept thinking about the moment of danger, when armed men had entered the restaurant and Vittorio had transformed from charming dinner companion to someone clearly capable of violence. Instead of being purely terrified, Elena realized she had felt something else, a thrilling sense of being protected by someone powerful, someone who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. On Thursday evening, as Elena was working late at her drafting table, her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her building had good security, so visitors had to be announced by the doorman. Elena approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. A young woman stood in the hallway, elegantly dressed and holding what looked like a large envelope. She was beautiful in an exotic way, with dark hair and striking features that suggested Mediterranean heritage. "Yes?" Elena called through the door. "Miss Rodriguez? I have a delivery for you from Mr. Castellano." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She unlocked the door and opened it, keeping the chain latch engaged. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't expecting anything." The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Castellano asked me to bring this to you personally. He said it was very important." Elena reluctantly unlatched the chain and opened the door. The woman stepped inside without being invited, her movements confident and predatory. "I'm Sofia Benedetto," the woman said, handing Elena the envelope. "I work closely with Mr. Castellano." Elena accepted the envelope, noting that it was heavy and expensive looking. "What kind of work do you do for him?" "Various things: business consulting, relationship management, problem solving." Sophia moved through Elena's small apartment, with the confidence of someone accustomed to evaluating and cataloging everything around her. "This is a lovely place," Sophia said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but lovely. "Very modest." Elena bristled at the condescension. "Thank you. What's in the envelope?" "Why don't you open it and see?" Elena opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were architectural blueprints. Not just any blueprints, but plans for a stunning mixed-use development that combined residential, commercial, and community spaces in exactly the kind of innovative design Elena had always dreamed of creating. At the bottom of the plans was a note in elegant handwriting: "For someone who dreams of creating spaces where people feel alive. V." "These are incredible," Elena whispered, studying the detailed plans. "Where did he get these?" "Mr. Castellano has them drawn up specially for you. He owns the property, a full city block in the downtown district. He's prepared to make you the lead architect on the project." Elena's hands shook as she looked at the blueprints. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of project that could establish her reputation and launch her career into the stratosphere. The development would be worth millions, a landmark building that would define the city's skyline for generations. "Why?" Elena asked. "Mr. Castellano was very impressed by your passion and talent. He believes you deserve the chance to create something meaningful." Elena looked up from the blueprints to find Sophia watching her with calculating eyes. "Of course," Sophia continued, "a project of this magnitude requires a very specific kind of partnership. Mr. Castellano would need to trust that his architect completely understands the unique requirements of working with his organization." The implication was clear. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an invitation into Vittorio's world, with all the benefits and dangers that entailed. "I don't understand," Elena said, though she understood perfectly. "Mr. Castellano is a very powerful man with many interests throughout the city. His projects require architects who can work discreetly, who understand that some aspects of the business are not discussed publicly, who can be trusted to maintain absolute confidentiality." Elena stared at the blueprints, her dream project literally in her hands. But she also understood what was being offered: a chance to build something extraordinary in exchange for becoming complicit in whatever illegal activities funded Vittorio's empire. "What if I'm not interested?" Elena asked. Sophia's smile grew colder. "That would be disappointing. Mr. Castellano doesn't often extend personal invitations of this nature. Refusing might be seen as ungrateful." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Elena realized she wasn't just being offered an opportunity. She was being recruited, and in Vittorio's world, recruitment might not be entirely voluntary. "I need time to think about this," Elena said. "Of course. Mr. Castellano will be expecting your answer by tomorrow evening. He'll be dining at Villa Castellano at 9 o'clock if you'd like to discuss the project in person." After Sophia left, Elena sat on her couch staring at the blueprints spread across her coffee table. They were perfect, exactly the kind of innovative, community-focused design she had always wanted to create. The building would house families, businesses, artists, and community organizations in a seamless integration of form and function. But accepting the project would mean accepting Vittorio into her life permanently. It would mean becoming part of his world, with all the moral compromises and dangers that involved. Elena had grown up hearing her parents talk about the importance of honest work, of building something legitimate that you could be proud of. Her father had spent 30 years in construction, working with his hands to create buildings that sheltered families. Her mother had dedicated her life to healing people, to making the world a little better through her nursing. What would they think if they knew their daughter was considering taking money from criminals to build her dream project? But another part of Elena's mind argued that the source of the funding didn't change the value of what she would create. The families who lived in the building, the businesses that thrived there, the community that formed within its walls, they would benefit regardless of where the initial money came from. That night, Elena barely slept. She kept thinking about Vittorio's eyes across the dinner table, about the way he had protected her during the confrontation, about the quiet loneliness she had sensed beneath his confident exterior. She also kept thinking about the blueprints, about the chance to create something that would outlast her own life, something that would bring beauty and community to the city she loved. By morning, Elena had made her decision. That evening, she dressed carefully in a black dress that was professional but elegant, did her makeup with unusual care, and took a taxi to Villa Castellano. The restaurant looked different than it had during the storm, warm and inviting, with several couples enjoying intimate dinners at candlelit tables. Vittorio was waiting at the same corner table where they had first met. He rose when he saw her, his smile genuine and relieved. "Elena, I wasn't certain you would come." "I almost didn't," Elena said honestly. Vittorio pulled out her chair, and Elena caught that same expensive cologne that had made her head spin during their first encounter. "Did you look at the blueprints?" Vittorio asked once they were seated. "They're beautiful. Exactly what I've always dreamed of designing. But," Elena met his eyes directly, "but I need to know what I'm getting into. If I take this project, what does that make me? What does that make us?" Vittorio was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "It makes you someone who creates beautiful things with resources provided by people who appreciate beauty. It makes us partners in creating something meaningful." "That's not an answer, Vittorio. I need the truth." "The truth is that money is just money, Elena. What matters is what you do with it. I can give you the resources to build something extraordinary, something that will improve people's lives. Does it matter where those resources come from? It matters to me. Why?" The question caught Elena off guard. Because I want to be proud of my work. I want to build my career on something legitimate." "And what is legitimate? The politicians who approve building permits in exchange for campaign contributions? The banks that launder money through complex financial instruments? The corporations that exploit workers and destroy the environment in pursuit of profit?" Vittorio's voice was passionate, but controlled. "At least I'm honest about what I am." Elena couldn't argue with his logic, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that accepting his offer would fundamentally change who she was. "What exactly do you do, Vittorio? I need to know what I'm potentially becoming part of." Vittorio studied her face for a long moment. "My family provides services that operate in the spaces between legal and illegal. We protect businesses from harassment. We provide loans to people who cannot get them from traditional sources. We resolve disputes when the courts are too slow or corrupt to be effective." "Those are euphemisms." "Yes, they are, because the reality is more complex than simple labels like legal and illegal. We live in a world where the powerful prey on the weak, where justice is often bought and sold, where the police cannot or will not protect the people who need protection most." "So you've appointed yourselves as vigilantes?" "We have taken responsibility for maintaining order in communities that others have abandoned." "Yes, Sometimes that requires methods that others find distasteful. But the alternative is chaos. Elena thought about her own neighborhood, about the small businesses that struggled to survive, about the families who worked multiple jobs just to pay rent, about the elderly people who were afraid to leave their apartments after dark. "Have you ever killed anyone?" Elena asked suddenly. Vittorio's jaw tightened. "I have made difficult choices to protect people I care about and communities under my family's protection. I have never taken a life without just cause, and I have never harmed an innocent person." It wasn't a denial, and they both knew it. "Elena," Vittorio said, leaning forward slightly, "I understand your concerns, but I want you to know that if you work with me, you will never be asked to do anything that compromises your principles. Your job would be to design and build beautiful spaces. Nothing more." "And what about us? Is this just a business proposition?" Vittorio's expression softened. "What happened between us the other night? The conversation, the connection I felt. That was real. More real than anything I have experienced in years. But I will not lie to you. Being close to me comes with risks." "What kind of risks?" "People who want to hurt me might see you as a way to do that. Law enforcement might try to use you to gather information about my activities. Other families might see our relationship as a sign of weakness or an opportunity for leverage." Elena felt a chill. "That sounds terrifying." "It is. But I can also promise you this. No one will ever hurt you while I am alive to prevent it. You would have the protection of my entire organization, the resources of my family, and the devotion of a man who sees in you everything he wants to be better for." The words hung between them, loaded with promise and threat in equal measure. Elena realized that Vittorio was offering her more than just a building project. He was offering her a complete transformation of her life. "I need more time," Elena said. "How much time?" "I don't know." "This isn't the kind of decision you make over dinner." Vittorio nodded, though disappointment was clear in his eyes. "Take whatever time you need. The project will wait for you, and so will I." As Elena left the restaurant that night, her mind was no clearer than it had been before. Vittorio's offer was tempting not just professionally, but personally. She was attracted to his confidence, his intelligence, his obvious devotion to family and community, but she was also terrified of the violence that surrounded his world, of the moral compromises she would have to make. Over the next week, Elena found herself paying closer attention to the news, looking for stories about organized crime, territorial disputes, and the kind of violence that Vittorio had hinted at. She also found herself researching the neighborhood where the proposed development would be built, learning about the families and businesses that would benefit from improved housing and community spaces. The more she learned, the more complex the situation became. The area desperately needed revitalization, but previous attempts at development had been stalled by bureaucracy, corruption, and lack of funding. Vittorio's resources could cut through those obstacles and create something genuinely beneficial for the community, but accepting his offer would also mean accepting him, with all the dangers and moral ambiguities that entailed. 10 days after their dinner at Villa Castellano, Elena made her choice. She called the number Sofia had given her and left a message. She would meet with Vittorio one more time. They met at a small cafe near Elena's apartment, a public place where their conversation couldn't be overheard, but where Elena would feel safer than in one of Vittorio's restaurants. He looked surprised to see her, hopeful, but guarded. "I've thought about your offer," Elena said without preamble. "And?" "I want to build your development. I want to create something beautiful and meaningful, something that will improve people's lives." Relief and joy flashed across Vittorio's face. "Elena, you have made me very happy." "But," Elena continued, "I have conditions." Vittorio's expression grew serious. "Name them." "First, I control every aspect of the design and construction. No interference, No demands for changes that compromise the integrity of the project. Agreed. Second, all construction workers are paid fair wages with full benefits. No exploitation, no cutting corners on safety. Of course. Third, 20% of the residential units are reserved for low-income families at below-market rents. Vittorio smiled. You have a generous heart. Yes, agreed. And fourth, Elena took a deep breath. If I do this, if I become part of your world, I want to know that I'm with someone who is trying to be better. I can't be with someone who sees violence as a first resort or who hurts innocent people. Vittorio reached across the table and took her hand. Elena, meeting you has already made me want to be better. Having someone who believes I can be better, that is a gift I never expected to receive. So we're really doing this? Elena asked. The project and us? If you are willing to take the risk. Elena squeezed his hand. I'm willing. 6 months later, ground was broken on the Castellano Community Center, a mixed-use development that would house 200 families, dozens of small businesses, and community organizations serving one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. Elena stood next to Vittorio at the groundbreaking ceremony, wearing a hard hat and holding the architectural plans that had become her life's greatest achievement. The project faced challenges, permitting issues that were mysteriously resolved, labor disputes that ended with surprisingly generous settlements, and city council objections that disappeared after private meetings. Elena learned not to ask too many questions about these resolutions, focusing instead on the building itself and the community it would serve. Her relationship with Vittorio deepened as the project progressed. She learned that beneath his dangerous exterior was a man who genuinely cared about his community, who supported dozens of local businesses, who had paid for medical treatments for families who couldn't afford them, who had quietly funded scholarships for neighborhood children. She also learned that his world was indeed dangerous. There were late-night phone calls that sent him rushing out into the night. There were business meetings she wasn't allowed to attend. There were men with guns who accompanied them to dinner at certain restaurants. But Elena also discovered that Vittorio had been telling the truth about protection. She was safer with him than she had ever been alone. No one bothered her on the street. No one broke into her apartment. No one threatened her or tried to use her to get to Vittorio. His reputation and resources surrounded her like an invisible shield. Most importantly, she saw him changing. The brutal efficiency with which he had once resolved conflicts gave way to more diplomatic approaches. He began investing in legitimate businesses, using his influence to support community development projects, channeling his organization's resources toward legal enterprises. You're making me soft, Vittorio told her one evening as they walked through the construction site, reviewing progress on the building that would soon house hundreds of families. I'm making you human, Elena replied. A year later, the Castellano Community Center opened to enormous fanfare. The building was everything Elena had dreamed it would be: beautiful, functional, and alive with the energy of families and businesses and community organizations working together. At the opening ceremony, Elena stood next to Vittorio as the mayor cut the ribbon, and dozens of families received keys to their new homes. She thought about the night she had stumbled into Villa Castellano, soaking wet and hopelessly lost, and how that wrong turn had led to everything she had ever wanted. Do you regret it? Vittorio asked that evening as they stood on the rooftop of the building Elena had designed, looking out over the city lights. Which part? Any of it. Walking into the wrong restaurant, sitting with a dangerous stranger, building your career with money from questionable sources. Elena thought about the question seriously. I regret some of the things I've had to ignore. I regret some of the compromises I've made. But I don't regret choosing you, or choosing this life, or creating something that makes the world a little better. Vittorio pulled her closer, his arms strong and warm around her. You know, the night you walked into my restaurant, I was planning to have dinner alone, and then handle some very unpleasant business. Instead, I spent the evening talking to the most extraordinary woman I had ever met. Best wrong turn I ever made, Elena said. The best invitation I ever extended. Their love story wasn't conventional. It was built on moral compromises, dangerous secrets, and the kind of choices that most people never have to make. But it was also built on genuine connection, mutual respect, and the shared belief that love could make people better than they were alone. Elena never stopped being an architect, and Vittorio never completely left his family's traditional business. But together, they found a way to use their resources and talents to create something positive in the world, something that proved that even the most unlikely love stories can have happy endings. 5 years later, Elena Castellano, she had taken Vittorio's name after their wedding in the garden behind Villa Castellano, stood in front of the City Planning Commission, presenting plans for the second Castellano community development. She had built a reputation as the city's most innovative architect of affordable housing, and her buildings were known for their beauty, functionality, and positive impact on the communities they served. As she presented her plans to the commissioners, Elena thought about how her life had been shaped by a single moment of being lost in a storm. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you need to be, and sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most rewarding. That's the story of Elena Rodriguez, the architect who walked into the wrong restaurant and ended up finding her destiny. Her story proves that love doesn't always follow the safe path, and sometimes the most extraordinary relationships begin with the simplest invitation. Sit with me. If this story captivated you, and you want to hear more incredible tales of unexpected love, dangerous romance, and the life-changing power of wrong turns, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that fate has a sense of humor, and that the most meaningful connections often come from the most unlikely encounters. What did you think of Elena and Vittorio's story? Have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected love and life-changing decisions. Remember, sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what you're really looking for. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.